Welcome everyone to BSMA's second roundtable event for logistics. And this is concerning the logistics impact from COVID-19 on our life sciences. I just wanted to give a real brief definition of life sciences for those that may not exactly know. This covers the entire spectrum of the human condition. So everything from vitamins, nutritionals, up through and including biotech. So I'm really pleased that we are able to do a second round of this. Today's focus is going to be understanding what's changed since our group met last May. So it's been a few months. This Zoom event from Biosupply Management Alliance demonstrates our commitment to partnership with its members and colleagues desiring to better support our industry. We are mindful of how many patients have suffered with COVID-19 and have been affected, and those around them, their families. And now even more, our commitment to our patients' lives. My name is Joel Glendy. I'm a BSMA executive, longtime logistics professional. And today I'm so glad that each of you have decided to make the time to be here. This roundtable is being recorded. Our agenda is very simple, yet interactive. Each panelist is going to spend about 10 minutes on their key topic area to allow for follow-up questions. I just have 3 things to ask of each of you. Take the time to be attentive on this. If you can, shut down your other devices that may be interrupting you. It's worth it. We've got executives here that are very experienced in their areas of expertise. So I'd really like you to take that time. The second thing, if you have any questions, there's a chat tool that you can use to submit them. And I have a colleague that's gonna help filter through them, and we can cover that in the last 10 minutes or so. And then lastly, any of you online here or that are gonna see this recording, I ask if you're interested and you think that you can do better than any of us, or you want to get involved, this is a time to start reaching out to BSMA. We're asking for your help. We're desirous of learning more on what capabilities are out there, both if you're a manufacturer or if you're a service provider. So there's many opportunities. So with that, I'd like to introduce our roundtable execs. Edward DeMartini is the VP of Air Freight from Kuehne + Nagel. Jeff Tucker is the CEO of Tucker Company Worldwide. Larry Tillum is the director from SkyCell North America. And Laurent Kovacs is the head of healthcare vertical for Schenker's America. So let's start with Edward. And I'm going to set the landscape here, because since we met last May, so much has occurred. Many changes, surprises. Our time today is really focused on highlights from our panelists, right? So with the COVID landscape, we're going to start at the 40,000 foot level. We're going to go down to where the rubber meets the road and everywhere in between. So starting at that high level, I'm going to ask each of the roundtable panelists to remark on how your companies have adapted, so some good things, and what are some turbulent things that you're dealing with or you're seeing with your clients. So with that, Edward, in May, the dramatic reductions in passenger air capacity was glaringly evident. Please describe the impact today in more detail, and help us understand any warning signs that may be out there with the vaccine deployment on the horizon of COVID.
Sure. So I think at high level detail, right, 42,000 aircraft grounded. That was the biggest piece of it, the wide body capacity that disappeared from the market. I think in some of the surprises that we saw with it, a number of them. I don't know that anybody probably, if we had gone back to the early days of the COVID or even pre-COVID, we would have thought we would have seen governments acted the way they did and just basically paying hand over fist to get charter aircraft to move material, PPE material, into their countries. And we watched a very nationalistic response by those governments. And of course, that tied up a lot of loose capacity. It took rates into the stratosphere on certain trades, even those that weren't the Trans-Pacific or Asia into Europe. And then I think since then, we've watched as everyone's now trying to figure out how do we navigate going forward into this, at the same time while watching an airline industry that is trying to figure out how to get back to normal. How do they not burn $25 million a day in cash, for instance? How do they get passenger demand to come back, make people feel safe? Because it is the passenger demand that's ultimately going to bring back the wide body capacity. And then, of course, you look at the vaccine deployment, and I would say the very first warning sign is history repeats itself. We can probably expect another very nationalistic approach by certain governments to ensure that vaccines or APIs or even some other downstream items would be made available to their countries as they go forward. And so they may react in the same way that they did with PPE. But I think we're going to see that across different trade lanes than what we had seen in the past so far. And then, of course, the only other piece out of that is a lot of discussion, obviously, around the whole vaccines. Lots of big numbers, 8,747, 1,600 747s. I don't know that anybody has the crystal ball. I don't think anybody has figured it out exactly yet. But there is certainly a lot of questions around not just capacity, but temperature controlled capabilities, handling procedures at varying places and that. And I think that's where a lot of other questions are going to be. And when we talk to a lot of life science and pharma healthcare companies in terms of that, is really planning for a lot of those what ifs, and have you really dug into the risk assessment on where you think you're going to be shifting and moving APIs, vaccines, and everything else. So that's kind of quick nutshell Reader's Digest version.
Right. Appreciate it. Let's switch to Jeff Tucker and at the ground level where the rubber meets the road. Jeff, with all the volatility we're seeing in other modes of transport, how has this impacted the road transport side since May? And please help us by describing the current state for the trucking industry, including supporting last mile needs.
Well, since May, it's been a heck of a story in trucking. So May we went from the lowest truckload demand in recorded history to what is today at or equal to the highest truckload demand seasonally than has ever been recorded. So I've been describing this year as essentially 100 years of U.S. economic history and culture in 6 months. We've had January, February started out kind of ho-hum. We saw a dip in the Chinese imports, and that slowed down things a little bit, made trucks a little bit more available. Then we've had the Spanish flu in 1918 in March, and the roaring 20s for 2-3 weeks after March in trucking because of all the toilet paper buys. And then the Great Depression hit, and there were crickets. People were taking loads way below their cost just to keep moving and hoping and praying that something would rebound. Thankfully, we didn't have a war in there, but we've had now sort of a composition since May, really since June. There have been about 20 straight weeks of increased demand for trucking. And as I said earlier, the data that I'm looking at to say in that recorded history time is Morgan Stanley truckload demand index. And that's Morgan Stanley's been doing this since 2004, I believe it was, but for quite some time. And we've never seen numbers as low as we did in May for demand and numbers is high. Now, truckstop.com also provides information along these lines. And we've seen, just as demand has been skyrocketing, prices have been skyrocketing as well. So sort of what's, like what the heck has happened? We still have the largest, we have continued to see the largest number of trucking companies in business ever. And that has continued month on month on month. We're seeing, at least with regard to, driver count, what we see with FMCSA data, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration data, is the largest number of drivers. However, we know that most of the largest carriers, and probably the small, medium-sized carriers, have parked trucks, and drivers have left. And shippers have used at that time, that softness in January, the depression in April, March, April, May, to go out and buy. They've restructured their core carrier network, and now they're just paying a terrible price. We're seeing approximately 1 in 4 loads that are tendered being through TMS systems by shippers rejected. That's extraordinary.
25%.
Almost 25%. Extraordinary, indication of what demand is like. You saw almost no tender rejections during our Great Depression earlier this year. So I think we still have tens of millions of people unemployed. I think we're coming out of this way slower than virtually every Western country has come out of this thing, and it's punishing the economy. We're punishing these people who are out of work, and all those people who are out of work are not buying the stuff we need to be shipping. So, I think that's what's keeping a lot of drivers out of it. I think also what maybe left a lot of drivers out of the marketplace was that federal unemployment. Now, of course, we know that ran out several weeks ago, and we don't know if and when that'll ever come back. I think now my expectation is over the next several weeks, months, the marketplace, if it stays the same, and who knows, we might be entering some other 100-year American history lesson. Who knows what the rest of the year handles? But if demand stays as high as it is, it'll likely bring some of those drivers back.
Right.
And truck purchase, Class 8 vehicle data just went up to its highest number in 2020 in August. So we're seeing signs that carriers are buying and drivers are coming back. But right now, I have to tell you, with regard to temp control, those 747s that Edward and IATA are talking about, that has to get to the plane, or it has to get to container if there's such a thing, by truck. And right now, even temp control is at its highest demand ever. So I have a feeling that this capacity constrained environment, when vaccines come around, if it remains, the trucks will go to the highest dollar. And I'll recall back to hurricanes Katrina and Rita.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a lot of trucks available at that time. We were still in a capacity starved environment. That was the first capacity crisis since deregulation in 2003 and 4, and that was 5. And FEMA just sucked up all the available capacity. So this huge humanitarian effort, there's going to be a duty that a lot of folks feel, and I believe that the pharma companies and the forwarders and folks like us will be paying whatever it takes to get that capacity, but it will temporarily at least punish food shippers and other temp control shippers. And it's going to be a ripple effect that's going to take a lot of effort by everyone to somehow get through.
Right, and this will be a good lead in for Larry too, but I wanted you to address this. Any recommendations or things that the shippers can do and the service providers that help on this, on anticipating of, in the trucking, both in the capacity side and demand, are there any things they can do to anticipate this as the vaccine deployment starts to roll out?
Yeah, I think talking amongst your providers. I think I talk about this often. I've got customers in the same exact marketplace, products on the shelves against one another, and we consider both dear important customers and friends, but one of them goes about their business differently. They'll bring in their distribution center folks, their security folks, their transportation folks, their third-party logistics companies, and us. We're a freight brokerage. We've never owned a truck. Bring us in, and they're planners, and we have meetings where we solve the issues. We have quarterly business reviews, and that model of collaboration, talking, and then taking that information all back into your organizations, then coming back with updates and plans, so critical. Versus my other customer in that space, we meet with their transportation team occasionally, and you can see the vivid difference in how they've digested that. We did a pretty notable, I think the largest prescription to OTC conversion several years ago, a few years ago. And same thing, we planned on that, and we planned about all the different possibilities that may occur. And hey, a lot of these companies, all these companies that are making these vaccines, they've got security, they've got really tight SOCs. You're going to have to decide. Talk about risk management. You're going to have to decide where you're going to bend on that, because there is not enough pharmaceutical grade temp control carriers out there that you can audit before you launch this thing to possibly remotely have a chance at meeting all of your SOCs. So you've got to ask that question. And then of course there's this black hole when forwarders handle some, the forwarder might be certified and audited and approved, but doesn't necessarily mean all the partners that they're going to have to rely on are. So there's these little black holes that, from a risk standpoint, that you really have to get your head around.
That's a great point, a great lead in for Larry, and pressure's on you now, Larry.
Well,
as we hit this, yeah. So hitting this area of temperature management, right? And as things get disrupted, and they will, in all areas of the supply chain on this, how are you seeing right now in your line of business with temp control containers, and how are you able to help in this regard, not only just for the vaccines, but all of the biopharma shippers? Are you seeing a need out there for adapting to different processes that Jeff was talking about, and making sure that you have the right vigor, right? That you have the right things, that you're either revalidating or requalifying? Are you seeing that from your clients? Are you also seeing different areas that your company is going after to ensure that we're going to have adequate supply there for temp management?
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. And going to that, it's actually been really critical that we're able to communicate as well as we do with the customer, whether it's the actual pharma manufacturer, one of their suppliers, their 3PL, etc. And for us, through the process, it's always been in our DNA that when we are implementing, we go through SOPs beforehand and we walk through. We're fortunate in that we have our simulation tools and things of that nature that allow us to plan for different events and for contingencies. So what we've seen is the need to be very flexible and very variable. Give you a great example. It would be very easy to just say, hey, we're only going to move on a temperature controlled truck and otherwise forget it. Or same with an airline. We're only going to move on a cargo aircraft where we're in the right temperature. What we've had to do and really be flexible with and carry through is going through our tools and then going through our partners to see where the risks are in the supply chain and to make sure that our product, which is a container, will have the right energy. So what the key then is not so much ESTA or ISC or any of these testing, but real-time data analytics that you can process. So I might give Jeff, for example, a call and say, realistically, to get it from the JFK airport to Allentown, PA, what are we talking about? How much waiting time? And what is it if it's in a temp control truck versus if it's in a non-temp control? And what's realistic? Or I might talk with Lawrence or Edward and the teams at their respective companies and say, all right, what is the options as far as transit point? Where are those points? And then we'll talk through with the customer how we map it through and what kind of energy there is. Because it's one thing to look at these ESTA and ISC tests, and they're important for the industry. But for us, we look at it as having our average shipment, for example, is 8.5 days. So at 8.5 days, if you're looking to keep temperature control, you're talking over 200 hours. You have to be able to know that you have independent runtime and what you can do. So that's a collaboration then. So we might call Jeff and say, hey, Jeff, we need it to be in a temp controlled truck for this much time. Or Lawrence or Edwards teams and say, guys, it doesn't have to be in this part of the holds. You can move it as general cargo, but when it arrives in Dubai, it's got to go into this much time. For us, it's about the planning and the communications and using our tools, but more than anything, it's linking up all the players. So you have to really get together, go through what the variables will be, and also be ready for contingencies. Because if something does happen, a carrier pulls an aircraft out of rotation, there's a delay, whatever the case, or there's change in routing, you have to have the backup plan as well. Because for us, excursions is not an option. That's the one thing that SkyCell has been critical on. We are going to protect that. It's holy. We're going to protect the customer. But we have to not just say, we're only going to be good for this many hours and good luck to you. The discussion really has to be a collaborative one in which we're using tools to plan the routing and communicating with the third-party logistic provider and the customer to make sure that everything is in place.
Great. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be one of these challenges that is similar to the moonshot. You know, failure is not an option. We have to make this work. Going to Laurent now, and specifically, we're talking in the terminals, carriers side of it. We've assumed that the passenger capacity would be re-injected in the networks. And how are you seeing this now? How is that influencing access to temp control in the infrastructure? What are you seeing in storage, you know, in airports? What are the you know, interim storage? Are we going to be at a point of, I won't say point of no return, but a very difficult path here in the future to try to comply with the needs of the shippers? Your thoughts on this, Laurent?
Hi, Joe. Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. I think a lot has happened since we last were on this panel in this forum between May and now. And I talked about this back then. The expectation was that capacity is going to come back maybe in a greater scale than it has. And what we have seen in the marketplace since then and now is that because, as Edward mentioned, the passenger demand has not come back as maybe some were expecting. That has had an effect on the network designs of carriers and how many aircrafts they deploy. In the public domain, if you followed the news in the past couple of months concerning airlines, you have seen that that big players were hard pressed for financial injections, and there still exists a looming danger of real cutbacks in their personnel. And the effect that has is far more than just on the airlines. It does concern the entire ecosystem, handling agents and other participants that work together in the supply chain. I think one notable thing that I have also noticed, and Jeff has spoken to that, and also Larry alike, that we have seen an increasing level of collaboration within the industry players, and there is a lot of engagement among the providers in the chain to make sure that we plan for the challenges that are ahead, so we can serve the ultimate need and keep their supply chains coming. Now, also in the public domain, Joel, I am very happy to read that a lot of airlines have increased their capacity for handling temperature-sensitive goods. There were a couple of announcements across the major markets that the airlines have invested and opened up in a timely fashion some additional capacity and facilities when it comes to managing temperature-controlled goods. We have seen a lot of announcement in logistics service providers going out and making sure that they can support the customer bases just like we do, with additional capacities available. And I think that's going to continue in the short future. We are going to see more of those investments coming in. And I also said in the last session that temperature integrity might be a topic of concern. Luckily, so far as the public domain information is concerned, we haven't heard a lot about any big or major challenges, probably because I have also seen the industry, the packaging industry, react very swiftly in bringing out appropriate solutions to cover the temperature needs that the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industry has. Now, in closing, I think, Joel, you asked that what challenges might be ahead in terms of the temperature ranges that are there. I find it very interesting that, as Edward mentioned, we are talking about and thinking about an unbelievable number of resources in terms of aircrafts and trucks that we will need for this undertaking to happen. And I think, based on what I have seen and read, it's very intriguing that the planning of the industry and the participants in the successful, let's say, phase 3 trials now, I think there we have 9 there and 5 limitedly approved, that they all planning in a very peculiar temperature range, sub-zero, minus 35 or below Celsius, which I think is unprecedented. So that is going to keep us busy and concerned about some other factors. Transporting deep frozen will require 2 other aspects, and not only the right container technology or the right packaging technology, but also making sure that you can provide those temperatures. So we will probably see a demand in dry ice. Dry ice is one medium that can support sub-zero, below cryogenic temperatures. And then we also might see an increase for the demand of PCMs. And to both of these, I think it will be crucial to continue that collaboration and that approach within the supply chain to keep on talking and make sure that there is upstream visibility to the players, because otherwise we might end up creating even worse shortages than anticipated before, and creating also delays.
Sorry, I was on mute. Really appreciate that Laurent, because it's going to bring up for each of our panelists a discussion on the multitude of temperature needs that are going to be out there for a COVID vaccine in deployment. So I'm not sure how many audience have really thought about this, but when I first was learning packaging engineering, a mentor said, well, there's only 3 ways that you can ship: on dry ice, you can ship on wet ice, or you can ship ambient. Now we have progressed as an industry, but not too much further, because though most vaccines now are shipped 2 to 8, you know, there's better ways than just on wet ice with passive packaging. But when you're getting into the area that Laurent is talking about, and that is interim storage in a deep frozen condition, we have a freezer capacity challenge out there in the industry. And when we're talking about freezer, it's not home freezer, you know, which is approaching -10°C. We're talking less, -20°C or colder. So I did a little survey to see in the industry how much is out there, and it is not significant. There's not a significant amount of pallet storage of -20 or colder. So as an industry, we're going to have to look at this to make sure that we can comply. But also, I want to talk about each mode here that's affected, starting with Edward. Anything that you're seeing in the industry from air freight, you know, how are we going to be approaching this if we have a limit on dry ice? I mean, for example, on passenger air, or are we going to have to switch more and more to cargo for moving the vaccines? What are your thoughts on this, Edward?
I would agree. I think you're specifically if you've got, let's just say the API, right? API's got to move in a -20. It's using dry ice, and you're talking hundreds of kilos of dry ice just for a couple skids. You are going to run into limitations from an aircraft perspective in terms of passengers. So I think there's going to be a reliance on freighters at that point. Now, you know, part of the wonderful aspects of our industry is kind of the ingenuity and coming up with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you watched passenger airlines try to lobby various regulatory agencies to consider a freighter an actual freighter. If in fact there are no passengers on it, you don't run into some of the same limitations from an oxygen perspective. So we could see something like that kind of come out of it, but otherwise you are going to run into those issues. And then of course, once you've got the freight on the ground at destination, the aspect of potential re-icing, is there dry ice supply? Is there enough of it? So forth. So there are going to be a lot of questions, and we've already fielded some of those to this day. And I think there's even a lot of dialogue taking place within the life science and pharma healthcare companies about, okay, can we get away from the -20? Can we get it closer to 2 to 8? Because that opens up then a much wider range of packaging and different solutions that they can utilize then in shipping some of these products around.
Yeah, great point. And I can share from my experience on this. It really comes down to the limits of freeze thaw that the product can handle. So that's typically why they keep it deep frozen until the last mile. They want to limit the freeze thaw to once or twice. Switching to, I want to switch to Jeff here because what we're talking about isn't only dry ice. It might even impact, you know, liquid nitrogen and things of that nature. To what extent, we don't know yet, depending on which of the vaccines get qualified. But just in terms of limitations on reefer trucks, what are you seeing out there as this deploys to the volume? Just talking, you know, North America, including Canada and Mexico, what kind of limitations are we going to have in reefer trucks? And I can transition to Larry after that, but just your thoughts on that. You know, are we going to be in a real challenge here, or can we handle this demand? You're on mute.
Thank you. I don't think I have any rosier picture than what Edward just indicated. It's a small segment of the trucking. First of all, it's a small segment of trucking company trucking industry that handles temp control. That can handle life science. It's a much smaller subset of that group that can handle pharma within life science. Right? There's a whole kaleidoscope of products and life science. And to get to -20 in a trailer is exceptionally rare, relatively speaking. So yeah, that's why I was saying earlier, there's got to be whether it's a 2 to 8 or whether it's some other augmented, like dry ice and certainly like Larry's SkyCell product. There's got to be different ways than pure temp control to over the road temp control, or they've got to be thinking differently. I mean, we've got brilliant scientists researchers working on these vaccines, and we're going to want to push it out as quickly and effectively as we can, but there's not that much equipment. And I mentioned how in short demand it is, or a short supply it is right now. It's a potential bottleneck.
Yes. Larry, what are you seeing? Is your company being approached on different ways that you're going to be able to ensure anything other than 2 to 8, or are you primarily focused in that arena right now? And are there things other than just using a reefer trailer that you're qualifying?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, in terms of other opportunities, we are looking at all of them and monitoring where we would be within that cycle. So we do get that flexibility to look at other than reefer trailers and other than reefer planes and so on and so forth. But getting back a little to this discussion, I would say that Edward's point earlier, we're absolutely hearing from IATA, they're basically lobbying to test the water, so to speak, for what they could do to move a dry ice type move. And that it's still the viability of having that much lift for a deep frozen type product, it is going to be limited. So I think, I'm not giving away any NDA secrets, most of the manufacturers are looking to initially put out the vaccine in deep frozen, but once it's a more commercialized product, it will go out in 2 to 8. But until that time, what we're doing is we're looking at some of our technologies and talking with our existing customers where we have non-disclosures, of course, and such, about what we can do and aim towards it. We've developed years ago our frozen capabilities, but we have not commercialized that. And if we are to commercialize it, it would be specifically for the launch of the vaccine and how we can assist with it. So what I would say there is that there's limits to what I can talk about and what has been feedback with the customer. We will not be looking at this time to commercialize, meaning for a general all the time use. Mm-hmm. But for the purpose of getting the vaccine out, yeah, we do have an answer for that and how we'll go about it. Those combos are really held at higher levels, let's say, and it's necessary because the care of the product through the life cycle, you have to have flexibility. There really isn't enough capacity to manage what they're saying. IATA's lobbying for that. I'm sure that Jeff would tell you that the same is even on the trucking lines. And we're seeing that each country is doing things differently. I saw last week that Australia announced that CSL, which is not a vaccine producer, will be responsible for producing the vaccine for domestic distribution in Australia, because as an Australian company, they certainly know their way around distribution. So the formula, whatever is going to be, I think that's for GSK's vaccine or Astra's. I think it was Astra's, whatever the case. Once you get past where it's able to be commercialized and sent out there, it's going to have to be manufactured in that country, because the realistic push to get it that much frozen on an aircraft is not, it's not practical. I do think though that not just SkyCell, I think that all of our competitors in the field are trying to see what options we could work in to provide a safe environment for our clients to load their products in. At the same time, because of the limitations that you'll have in terms of the amounts that can go, you really have to look at it as who are your customers today that you can work with on this, rather than trying to go out and solicit a new customer with something. You've got to plan it with the people you're already working with and qualified and validated for, so that you can really put something like that process in. It is moving heaven and earth. It's going to be tremendous. At the same time, one of the things that we'll see that'll be mitigated is many of these countries will have it made in country. So if you look at the Pfizer's been very public with what they're doing with BioNTech, and it's quite clear. So for this market, for the American market, some of it will have to ship, and for some of the European, it will have to ship. But for other places in the world, it'll be made in those countries. And again, you'll see that the governments will take first priority. So there was something in the BBC just report yesterday about the 7 makers that are contracted by the UK government, how many doses. Most of those will actually come in the UK.
Yeah, it's just like a new product launch. There's a launch phase, and then there's going to be deployment to probably the second, third tier, and then the masses. But since Laurent was nice enough to set us up with that challenge, I'm going to let you have the last word in this area and the myriad of things. What are you seeing, from your, last few months on this? A direction that the different terminals, the different airports, your experience on the passenger and cargo aircraft side, what types of things are being prepared for? I think because that'll probably give us a better window here, other than what we've talked about. Anything we haven't covered on it?
Sure. I think there is one other aspect that is going to be key here, and I think all of the participants in the chain has been heavily involved with this to a larger or lesser extent, and that is there are multiple handoffs, as we all know, in the supply chain, the transportation chain for air freight, and those multiple handoffs are the crucial moments, and they pose a great risk to temperature integrity. So add in now this challenge with the dry ice or a sub-zero PCM. And it's pretty clear that I think what we need to focus on is making sure that there is enough visibility and there is technology deployed to the greatest extent that it can be used to grant visibility in these parts of the supply chain and transport chain. And that will be key to counteract, or at least to have a view in what are the weak parts that maybe need to be adjusted. So I think that's one of the big challenge that is going to come at us. Luckily, in the industry and on the service provider side, there is plenty of options available. And again, I think collaboration will come in as one of the greatest factors in solving this challenge and any other.
I agree. Yeah, we have to check our egos in at the door, as once was said by Quincy Jones, because there's a lot of great companies out there, and we want to make sure that we're getting the best and brightest types of solutions out there that are going to work for the long run. Well, one question that came up, and this is for any of you to want to chime in on. What are you hearing from the shipper side on commitments, in terms of allocated space, in terms I know where this question was headed, but different things, because, without commitments to material, it's pretty hard to allocate space. But anything you guys want to share on what you're seeing on this from the shipper's side that you can talk about?
I think if anything, I think it's a lot of questions. The one piece though that, and I've kind of chuckled about a little bit, is that I think the route of going about it is we see still a lot of uncertainty. Again, is it going to be -20? Is it going to be 2 to 8? How much is going to be moving it in one time? Where is it going to be coming from? Where is it going to be going to, right? But one of the things that in that regard that I've kind of referenced, and I said, it would be interesting to see almost a different way of approach. There's really so far been more of an approach of trying to tender it out to everyone, because I think that's kind of what everyone feels comfortable with. But when you think about it in the sense that, Elon Musk probably didn't build the SpaceX rocket by figuring out the financial cost of the parts. He probably built the rocket first and then figured out how to cost it properly, right? So I think that maybe with so much uncertainty right now, there isn't really a defined way that any one entity or even a group of entities are going about it. I think everyone's kind of in this sourcing of information mode at this point, and then we're watching it shift and mold over time until we get closer to where any one organization may be ready to pull a trigger, so to speak, to launch some of these programs.
Got it. Anyone else want to cover that?
I think, Joel, in addition to what Edward was saying, and I agree with his views on taking maybe a different approach, which might lead to a more successful outcome. I think still with the uncertainties and the way how capacity looks like, and how or general lives and global travel is not likely to come back when the vaccine launch is on the horizon. I think the capacity what is out there will be again highly contested. I think we might see especially again a lot of speculation here. I want to highlight that. But if the candidates that are today in the pipeline or would launch somewhat simultaneously, then we might see a similar scenario play out maybe on a longer horizon, what we have seen back in March and April, because more capacity is not likely to be able to be deployed on a short notice. So again, I think I'm highlighting a need for a different approach, and definitely need for collaboration in our space.
Great. I have a question that came from the audience, and I think it's more directed to Larry and Laurent. How will COVID impact validation or qualification processes? And I'll just add on that. Are you seeing anything now where existing clients are re-qualifying differently that you can talk about? I mean, is this trend already occurring?
So I'll start it off. So yeah, it's been actually occurring for some time. COVID has just accelerated some of it. So I mentioned before, ESTA and ISC, what we've seen is that having those documents and reading those documents, in the past, a lot of the major pharma companies still wanted to do their own testing and test your unit in terms of the container to their standards rather to an industry standard. What we're seeing now is more of a move to live data, historical data, and the mapping of it so that they can perhaps look at alternatives and different options and be more flexible. Really, they've had to go outside. We make a box. They've had to go outside the box, whether it's our box or anybody of the others, but really to see how things will move and what flexibility they have. If you're just going to say it tests to 110 hours and we're only going to accept the routing of 100 hours or something like that, you're not doing yourself a service. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that in a change. And for us, it's good because now we are able to get to a more relevant conversation, a real-time, real-life scenario rather than simply test scenarios, and how you can accommodate different scenarios and different options. So, Laurent, is there? I think you muted my
Anything
friend.
you're
Yeah, I think one point I want to add to this. In my experience, validation qualification protocols are lengthy procedures, and so if we need to use as an industry all available resources, the burden is on the shipper side to figure out a way to shorten this time. I think on a service provider side, this is a non-issue because service providers are well accustomed to the fact of deploying various available technologies in the marketplace.
Yeah, put the pressure back on us shippers, huh?
Well, we all have to carry some parts of that, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen also some questions here on the chat.
Yes, I was gonna bring it up.
Right. So I want to reflect on some of the multiple questions here. I think the one is how much temperature controlled container capacity is out there in the industry. I wouldn't be able to answer that with certainty. I think that since I've been working in this industry, and that's quite a while now, I always seen the demand surpass the supply. So I don't think that's going to be any different this time around.
That's a huge point. The demand is typically, I don't know if you could say a threshold, but double-digit percentage points more than the capacity. So people have freight that's delayed or bumped, or depending on their contracts.
Joel, if I could,
their contracts.
if I could tag on to that one a bit too, what we saw, especially in the months right after the shutdown, was it wasn't about how many containers you have, it was about where are they.
Yes,
So
positioning, repositioning,
it
etc.
was crazy. 12, 15-hour days have been quite common because those are the real discussions you're having. And again, that's where, it's funny. For many years, we had heard shippers say, "Really, do we need 3 and 4 PLs?" And the answer has really proven itself in the value here. As Laurent said, they're going to play. There's always been that procurement situation where the field is level. I think what people are finding now in emergencies, the field is not level. It really isn't. To give our own, we had a situation where we needed containers in an eye blink of time to shift from our facility in Canada to an East Coast location. And thank goodness when we called Jeff Tucker's company, they answered that call. They stayed with us through the weekend. There was when they said 24/7, they meant 24/7. And we hit the timeline that our shipper needed to get that equipment. It was about where were these containers at that time. There is, no matter what, there's never going to be enough at one site, regardless of who it is.
Got it.
You've got to be able to shift that capacity and have the flexibility, and you've got to have third-party logistic, fourth-party logistic, however you want to call it. You've got to have those players that you have connections to that are going to watch it all the way through.
Yeah, you got it. Let me summarize that. As an independent, I can say this is your success as a shipper will be directly proportional to how well you've established partnerships with your key service providers and even those that are newer. How well you set that up is going to directly affect your outcomes. And with that, there's one last question, and it's a tough one. We've got 5 minutes, so whoever wants to tackle this one, I think it's a good one because Devendra has brought this up on digital solutions. And I know Jeff had talked about now there's truckers have certain things that they're having to measure. So it works in all modes of transport, but are there digital solutions that are going to help us here, not only emerging, but things that are out there today that we can use in this quest?
I think Joel, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I can speak from the trucking perspective, and I'll take 1 minute because we only have 5. There are a lot of merging tools, and you know, we're busy. You know, as a third party, never owned a truck. It's one of the biggest hang-ups, let's say, in a shipper's mind is I don't feel like I have enough control. So we've gotten up to about 95% visibility in our supply chain, and that's for our customers to see that. So I think it's really important. It's really important today. I think that in terms of how we're going to manage the COVID vaccine, I don't think the Internet of Things that we want to see eventually, and that is, did the trailer door open? You know, how long did it open? Who was the person that opened it? You know, temperatures, all with the mapping that we'd like to see within that trailer. Again, if you're shipping day to day pharma, it's there, plenty of it. If you're trying to ship a surge like this is going to be, you're not going to have some of that data. So there's a whole slew of data coming, and it's going to take years, quite literally years, to put it together in such a way that we can see it the way we want to see it, when we expect to see it.
Tracking with you. Work in progress. Anyone else want to tackle this one in a minute?
I wanted to add to that very quickly that I think on a visibility side, as far as the hardware is concerned, we've been very fortunate in the past years. There is a lot of good things out there that are available. Are they validated by the shippers? Maybe not. At the same time, they fulfill very much the function of providing tactical visibility into temperatures, humidity, shock, light exposure, etc. I think another point here to consider is as we use all different type of devices, what is the capability to integrate it into a platform that allows you to run analytics, that allows you to have a very user-friendly interface and follow that data. And I think that's going to be where I would look at as far as capability is concerned in this space.
Great. Let's do a quick wrap up. Go around the table. Start with you, Edward. Any summary stuff, message you want to leave us?
Sure. I think whether or not you're involved in the manufacturing of vaccines and trying to plan out those supply chains, I think you start the discussions now with your trusted partner or your trusted forwarder, simply because, as we've all talked about, it's going to impact every industry, not just the life science, pharma, healthcare, but every industry out there as capacity is pulled away. And I think we will see a lot more of the impact on the overland portion, as Jeff was alluding to earlier. So the better you can plan, the better you'll be prepared for it then.
Thank you. Next, Jeff. Sorry, Larry.
Yeah. Not much more to add. I think Edward nailed it there. Reach out now. Talk to your partners now. You will not have enough capacity. So make a new friend.
Right, Larry?
Collaboration is king. That's the simple for me. And that'll be, so
Great.
keep it rolling.
Laurent, you have the last word.
Yeah, I echo everything that was said before. So we're happy to engage and talk, and excited to be part of your journey.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. And audience, thank you for being patient with us, getting started close to on time. But this has been a real pleasure. And from all at BSMA and from my panelists, I want to wish you the best and good luck in your journey on this. And we'll be talking soon. We have a big event coming in October 22nd. So hope you're tuning in via the website and from messages from our team. But with that, I'm going to conclude here, and thank you. Have a great day.